Hello, Khenpo. I am a student from the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Hong Kong. I am really grateful that you have taken time to come here to give us teachings on the most profound Dharma. May I ask, Khenpo, which ones in the preliminary practices do you think are more effective for quickly accumulating the two merits of merit and wisdom? Which ones would be relatively faster? We know we shouldn't have such discriminating thoughts since every Dharma teaching is ultimately profound, but could you share some pith instructions that might bring quicker results? The second small question is about the nature of mind in emptiness. So here I would like to ask you, Khenpo, regarding the understanding of emptiness through hearing, contemplation, and meditation, how great is the distance between that and directly realizing emptiness in one's own mind? Or, to put it another way, in our daily practice, how can we, in our everyday lives, take the insights gained from hearing, contemplation, and meditation, and correctly focus all our energy on ultimately realizing emptiness in our own mind? Because all words are ultimately pale, only actual practice is the eternal, unchanging truth. All hearing and contemplation must ultimately lead to discipline, concentration, and wisdom in order to attain liberation.
First of all, because nowadays we truly live in a fast food era in our everyday routines. Why are fast food companies doing so well? It's because people are incredibly busy these days. If we practiced Buddhism in a modern fast food style temple or joined a convenient fast food style group, maybe a lot of people would, actually participate in these activities with interest and enthusiasm. Of course, as someone who has studied or practiced Vajrayana for an extended period of time with dedication over years, I believe that the most crucial foundation for accumulating merit and wisdom, regardless of which school we follow, is first to truly contemplate the rarity of human life, the impermanence of life, and the suffering of samsara. Only then can we become a Buddhist. Otherwise, if a person doesn't even accept the existence of past and future lives, then speaking about practicing Chan or Vajrayana teachings doesn't make sense, and practices like taking refuge, generating Bodhicitta, and confession are all fundamental and simple ways to accumulate the merit and wisdom needed for the path. These are the most basic methods. Of course, if one has great faith in their teacher and the Dharma, then for a very few individuals, it may not be necessary to go through such a long process. It's not really that long. Even practicing the preliminary practices isn't so long. If we truly want to practice, and we aren't even willing to put in the time or effort for the preliminaries, then I'm afraid it will be difficult. In Chinese Han Buddhism in the past, masters like Yingguang and the sixth patriarch had disciples do chores and ascetic practices for years. This is also a form of confession and a skillful means. So if we want to practice Vajrayana or even more profound teachings in the exoteric tradition, it's best to lay a solid foundation. Otherwise, if you build on ice, everything will collapse at a certain point without any warning at all. That's a real possibility. Secondly, since you say that words are all pale and powerless, then my words are also pale and powerless from that perspective. What I say may not necessarily have any effect or make a difference whatsoever. That's why I just said, like I mentioned, indeed, in front of someone who has truly realized their true nature in direct experience, all of these words may also be of no use or benefit at all. Why did the Buddha say in his teachings to disciples many times over, the nature of mind is unborn and undying, like empty space beyond all concepts and forms? Each person's realization is known only to themselves. The state that completely transcends words and thoughts is the true mother of prajna. That's the reason for this explanation. But we still need to rely on some words during the process of practice, rely on some prayers from the lineage, and rely on our own sense of reverence. Actually, whether it's Chan Buddhism or Vajrayana, for many essential teachings, your reverence for this Dharma method is extremely important. For example, Master Yinguang from the Han region also said this in the past. The benefits you receive are proportional to your level of reverence. The benefits you gain are just like that. Vajrayana Buddhism teaches the same thing. For instance, if you have great reverence for this Dharma method, frequently pray and regard it as the truly supreme treasure. Then through reverence, it is also possible that even though you have left behind all words and language, you can still truly and fully realize the true nature of your own mind.
I'm studying economics at the University of Hong Kong. I recently took refuge in Buddhism, but feel I haven't truly entered the Buddhist path yet. I have read many kinds of Buddhist books, including both Vajrayana and Sutrayana teachings. I personally feel that every school seems to make a lot of sense, but I don't know where I should begin my practice. My guru is currently not in the same place as I am, because I used to be in Beijing. For example, now that I'm in Hong Kong, I encounter many problems in my practice. But because of limitations of time and space, I can't communicate with him often enough to get guidance. So sometimes when I encounter a lot of confusion, I just don't know what to do. Another point is that, actually, before I took refuge in Buddhism, I always found that, over the years, I had a lot of things that could probably be called a sense of compassion and empathy within my heart naturally. I also saw some of my own suffering, but now I feel that through some methods, like the introspection you just mentioned, I feel that this suffering has actually become more and more apparent. In the past, for example, when I felt pain, I could go have some fun, buy something, or do something else, and I felt like it would pass. But now I feel like this thing is always there within me constantly without leaving. All you can do is pay attention to it, reflect on it, and examine it with introspection. Then it just keeps being there. So I feel very confused at this stage. Thank you, Khenpo.
Regarding your first question, in spiritual practice, your guru may not always be with you. Of course, it's best if you have one, but if not, I still recommend it. Nowadays, many people lack a systematic way of learning. If you study systematically, then during your spiritual practice, or regarding your understanding of Buddhism, many misunderstandings, biases, and issues will all be easily resolved. After studying for a while, you can become completely independent and self-reliant. So now, through various different means, we want everyone to first, because what we used to have in our minds was not the principles of Buddhism. It was filled with all sorts of worldly things and other random messy stuff. So now if you want to fully integrate your life with Buddhism, there will be certain difficulties. Therefore, the best and most effective method is to study Buddhism systematically. This is very important. The second question, when we practice, for example, let us consider it's not that you have too many problems or afflictions. It's just that you didn't pay attention before. For example, if you have a child and you didn't pay attention to them before, even if they were being naughty, you wouldn't have noticed it. But from the day you start caring about them, you begin to pay attention to them often. When you pay attention to them, their every action becomes very noticeable to you. So this is a sign that you are becoming aware of it. It's not that you experience more suffering after you start practicing. It's because when you start paying attention to it, it begins to show itself. But if you keep diligently practicing and making real efforts, then in the future, this kind of suffering and attachment will gradually disappear. This is a path that most practitioners generally need to go through.
Respected Khenpo, hello. I sincerely hope you are well. I am currently a fourth-year medical student, and I would like to kindly ask if you could please provide us with some helpful methods for discovering the treasures of our own mind. Thank you very much.
Actually, I feel quite ashamed to say that I understand the treasures of the mind, because this is such a profound subject. However, I am very interested in this area, and I find myself drawn to exploring its many aspects whenever I can. Over time, I may have developed a little bit of understanding in this regard myself, though I know there is still so much more to learn. I don't dare claim to have any great realization. Generally speaking, every sentient being has a unique and different character. If you yourself are interested, starting from the preliminary practices of Vajrayana and continuing up to receiving empowerments at the end, and then practicing some of the profound Dzogchen methods, you can fully realize some unimaginable states within them, states that cannot be described in words, and these can also be attained. Or, as some of the Chan masters of the past have said, read some Buddhist texts like the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch or the Diamond Sutra, or scriptures such as the Heart Sutra and other similar philosophical treatises that contain profound wisdom. If you read them with a sense of reverence and joy, just as it is stated in the Diamond Sutra, the past mind cannot be grasped, the present mind cannot be grasped, the future mind cannot be grasped. This cannot be grasped is not the true nature of Dharma. In Tibetan Buddhism's esoteric teachings, not attaining does not always mean true realization. But when you do not attain, there are two kinds of non-attainment. One fails as does not exist, other fails though exists. It's like when we lose something today, it actually exists here, but I haven't found it. If it truly doesn't exist, then its very nature is not just about not attaining. In fact, luminosity and emptiness are inseparable, but the principle of the inseparability of luminosity and emptiness, what I'm talking about today, such as the teachings of the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, including Nagarjuna's In Praise of the Dharma Dhatu, Maitreya's Ratnagotra Vibhaga, and sutras like the Tathagata Garbha Sutra. These texts explain this. Of course, if you find it really difficult to grasp just from the words, you can put effort into studying certain specific sutras and treatises. I think many people will be able to fully understand through this approach. When you truly understand, even if thousands upon thousands of people criticize you, saying your approach is wrong or your practice is incorrect, you will remain unwavering in your conviction. This unwavering conviction is not stubbornness, but a genuine kind of awakening. Just a moment, I haven't forgotten the person in yellow.
Respected Khenpo, hello Amitabha. I am at the present time a first-year graduate student currently studying in the Department of Social Work. I have been studying Buddhism for about 3 years, and now I am studying in the Social Work department. I want to do research, and I really want to actually find a way to integrate traditional culture with some Western research methods, to see if there is a better way to prevent psychological illnesses, or to be able to address some social problems. But ever since I started studying, I have had many doubts. I have great faith in Buddhism, but I wonder what methods could help more people to develop genuine and sincere faith in Buddhism or in traditional culture. This is currently my biggest confusion and doubt at this moment.
I often have the same feelings as you do about these matters. Actually, nowadays, many people's words, actions, and behaviors in society around us can seem quite troubling and concerning at times, apart from such as money and wealth. People nowadays do not truly value the especially precious treasures left by the great masters and eminent monks of the past. At times like this, it can be a bit heartbreaking, even distressing to witness this happening. Sometimes it feels like a kind of helplessness, but I think that anyone in any era, regardless of the time period, will inevitably encounter various different situations. When we look back at history, it has always been like this. People in the future may move toward an even more complex and unique society with greater challenges and uncertainty ahead than we face today in many different ways. As we step into such a state, I think first of all, as young people, we shouldn't worry too much about uncertain outcomes ahead at that time. We should approach things in the most proactive way possible with confidence and clear purpose, and let everyone recognize the importance and necessity of Buddhism and traditional culture. First of all, for anything, it's important to make sure everyone understands it. Promoting or making people aware of this principle is very important. If we promote Buddhism out of selfish motives, I don't think that's good. But if we do it out of a sense of responsibility to others, it's true that both Buddhism and traditional culture are extremely lacking in today's society. As Dr. Toynbee once said, people of the 21st century can be saved by relying on the teachings of Confucius, Mencius, and Mahayana Buddhism. That's well said. But how do we save them? What should we do? For most people, there's basically a blank here. It's a situation where nothing can be done. At times like this, especially for young people, if we don't pay careful and serious attention to this, each generation may unfortunately become worse than the last. At least people in the past had some genuine degree of respect for traditional culture. But now things are becoming more and more westernized. As society becomes more westernized, many people no longer have this concept. So, to put it simply, the first thing is that everyone needs to become aware of this. In the process of gaining this awareness, it may require everyone to put in effort and thought. Gradually, through collective action, organization, and some modern standardization, we can begin to spread these truly excellent and inspiring ideas and profound philosophies that can help to save humanity. In this way, perhaps even in the age of the Dharma's decline, there will still be many thoughtful intellectuals who wish to continue promoting our traditional Buddhist culture.
Thank you very much, Khenpo, for your response. There is another student with a question.
Hello, Khenpo. I am a student at the Buddhist Studies Research Center. I have a question.
Are you from the University of Hong Kong?
Yes, I'm from the University of Hong Kong. You mentioned at the very beginning that happiness is actually quite an important and truly significant starting point, the beginning of spiritual practice. Recently, I've had a problem. As a Buddhist, I may already know some methods to make myself happier or to help maintain a peaceful state of mind. But my current challenge is, how can I help those around me who for now have no faith or who have not yet found their own genuine and meaningful spiritual belonging or connection to maintain a relatively long-lasting sense of inner peace? For example, I have quite a few friends who are engaged in various forms of public welfare work back in mainland China. For them, a sense of powerlessness is a fairly common and persistent state. They don't really know whether what they're doing is actually useful or not, and they can't be sure. So as a result, they might easily become hopeful about some things, but they can also just as easily end up feeling disappointed. So what I want to ask is, as disciples of Buddhism, how can we help them, at least to become a bit stronger mentally? Thank you.
First of all, let me say, here at our school, many students consider themselves Buddhists. This makes me very happy as well and quite encouraged. It's not that just because there are a few Buddhists at the university, I respond differently or behave in a particular way. It's not like that at all. But this kind of atmosphere, this kind of thinking is especially needed and valuable for everyone in modern society today. And here, I've heard that even some teachers, if you have faith, for example, this one is a Christian, that one is a Buddhist, then people show a lot of respect for that teacher in the community here. Even when looking for a job, if you have faith, it's often easier to find one according to what I've heard. This is also a good thing that benefits everyone involved. Of course, as you just pointed out, as a Buddhist, you'll care for the people around you. Actually, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure either, because each of you has a different major, a unique area of study. Will it benefit society in the future? Will it benefit you personally? Society nowadays, as we all know, is quite complex. At first, you might think that this major and this knowledge are very beneficial, but in the end, it might not turn out the way you imagined. So when it comes to these issues in particular, certain problems may need particular and careful analysis. But overall, as practitioners of Mahayana Buddhism, we must not be selfish. This is the only principle. The greatness of Buddhism lies in not thinking for oneself, but for all sentient beings who have ever been our mothers. If you can't think for all sentient beings, then at least for the people around you, you should sincerely do your best. Help them with your diligence and respect, or with a joyful heart. At such times, I believe you will use your wisdom and compassion, drawing upon these important qualities to guide your actions and decisions, and employ the most skillful and expedient means to do this regularly and with thoughtful intention. In fact, many things in life require consistent, ongoing effort and a steady commitment over time. They also require a strong willpower and a resilient, determined spirit. If you have these qualities, apart from a few karmic conditions from past lives that are already set and unchangeable, generally speaking, people can change much of their fate through their own perseverance. So whether it's our own fate or others, it's the same when we rely on Buddhist principles. We must always act in a positive direction. Especially as Buddhists in this modern world, we should carefully pay attention to our words, actions, and image in front of others. In fact, in today's society, image is very important. If Buddhists act in a strange or unusual manner every single day, regardless of whether you are an intellectual, a monastic, or anyone else in society, if your words and actions are at odds with your family and your workplace, and every day you insist on doing things that others are not allowed to do. If you have a strange mentality, in the end others will see you as a weirdo. So our careers may not necessarily be very successful. On one hand, we should go along with the people around us, but on the other hand, we shouldn't just follow the crowd blindly. We should have a strong will to help all living beings as much as we can with compassion and dedication.
Homage to the Guru. I am a teacher at a school in mainland China. I have two questions. The first is that when I'm teaching, I find that when I present topics related to Buddhism directly and openly to students, if I talk about Buddhist matters in a straightforward way, about 90% of the students will scoff at it or feel somewhat averse. So with my limited knowledge, I try to reference, for example, elements from traditional culture, such as Confucianism, Taoism, and even medical knowledge, just a little bit of each, and weave them into my teaching. I first try to spark their interest, and then connect it to Buddhist teachings. I may sometimes say things that are not in accordance with the Dharma. I would like your guidance. Does this approach constitute disrespect or profanation of the Dharma? That is my first question. The second is, after hearing Khenpo's teaching on nothing can be grasped, Khenpo said either non-attainability of existence or non-existence. Recently, I have been teaching, and I have a little baby. When I recite the Tao Te Ching to him, in the second chapter, it says that beauty and ugliness are distinctly set up as a duality here. That's why there is a distinction between beauty and ugliness. But in reality, this thing is neither ugly nor beautiful. It is in a state of moderation. Is this considered emptiness? Or is this state perhaps a kind of non-attainability? Thank you, Khenpo.
I think, first of all, when you are teaching traditional culture or Buddhist knowledge to different audiences, sometimes you may need to utilize skillful means quite flexibly. This is not considered disrespecting Buddhism, because in our current environment and modern context, there are certain social concepts. If you directly teach Buddhism, not only might your efforts fail, but it could also lead to all kinds of misunderstandings or even adverse circumstances and so on. Traditional culture was undermined for a period of time. I once read a book that mentioned the well-known slogan, "Persist in criticizing Lin and Confucius to the end," which was also a phrase and slogan during the Cultural Revolution, persist to the end. But now, because times change, as we Buddhists say, everything is impermanent. So in today's society, compared to the past, not only is there no more criticism, but many sectors, including the education departments and so on, want to promote traditional culture with great enthusiasm, and there are even plans to restore it in various schools in the future at different levels. If we are to restore it, I think when it comes to traditional culture in the Han region, it mainly refers to Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, these three schools. When these three are revived, Buddhism is naturally one of them. Of course, for many people, this is still something they can't accept for the time being. But that's understandable. So, we use skillful means to carefully and effectively repackage it. With this kind of thoughtful packaging, it becomes more straightforward to promote, just like many products in society today. The filling is Buddhist in its philosophy, but the outer packaging is made to look more visually appealing, perhaps by using elements of Taoism or Confucianism for broader acceptance. And then we offer it to the students, for example. This not only has no faults, but is actually very meritorious. Also, as mentioned in the Tao Te Jing, for example, the one gives birth to two, two gives birth to three, and three gives birth to all things. The basic idea of duality and the arising of all phenomena can be established. But it doesn't mean that form is emptiness and emptiness is form, or appearance and emptiness are free from four extremes. And 8 elaborations. The state of Madhyamaka is not actually articulated there. In Buddhism, according to the profound view of ultimate truth, we can truly and fully speak of the non-duality of appearance and emptiness. This kind of state is very difficult or nearly impossible to describe using languages or words that we commonly use. Therefore, other forms of duality, for the time being, in the face of conceptual thought, things are either white or black, or in other words, either manifest or empty. For now, we can only conceive of these two. Apart from this, in fact, the true nature itself cannot yet be revealed by us at this moment. Only through long-term study, contemplation, and practice can we truly and completely attain the state described above, which is truly free from all dualities.
Hello, Venerable Khenpo. I am a student from the Department of Chemistry at the University of Hong Kong. I have two questions. The first question is, I saw in the news earlier that these days there are many newly graduated college students and even PhD holders in the monasteries who have become monastics. I would like to ask, what is your opinion on young people with high academic qualifications choosing to become monastics? That's my first question. And my second question is, I just checked your Weibo online and found that you already have more than 650,000 followers. That's quite a large number of people. I am also one of those 650,000. I often read your Weibo posts. I've noticed that you use some of the popular internet slang. I'd like to ask, do you go online often? What are your thoughts regarding using Weibo to spread the teachings of Buddhism? Thank you for your time.
Regarding the first question, actually, when I spoke at other schools in different cities, they asked about this as well. Nowadays, some highly educated college students are becoming monastics and renouncing worldly life. But compared to the total number of college students in universities nationwide right now, this is still a very small proportion overall. Because in the past, it often seemed that we generally thought that becoming a monastic was a kind of negativity in the world, or that only those who felt they had no other possible way out or alternative would choose to become monastics. And that these monastics are all people with very low qualifications who really couldn't find a job. If a highly educated person becomes a monastic, it's such a pity. Many people have this kind of mindset. So in the past, when a few exceptionally talented students from prestigious places like Peking University became monastics, everyone paid considerable attention to it. People were quite interested in this phenomenon. Now at Larung, there are also many highly educated and well-qualified monastics from both China and abroad. Indeed, I think compared to the overall population or the proportion of college students, the number of people who become monastics is still quite small. When the conditions are right for a very small number of individuals, it does happen. But this doesn't really have any impact on society, because becoming a monastic involves strict precepts, seeing through the affairs of this world and many other things. So I think it's impossible for many people to do it. Some families are afraid their children will become monastics and don't allow them to study Buddhism. This is also a kind of ignorance. I think that a few college students who are currently attending university are becoming monastics. It's actually a completely normal phenomenon for us. Looking back in history, many emperors and high officials also became monastics. So people with a certain social status, such as those with influence, becoming monastics is actually a very common and very normal thing. Now, the second question, you just started listening to my lectures and just started following my Weibo. You just made your evaluation of me, so the time has been rather rushed. But as for myself, actually, regarding so-called fans, for a while I felt it's impossible to have that many Buddhists and it's impossible to have that many fans. I specifically mentioned on my Weibo account that there are certainly fake followers among all of my fans who follow me. Even though I personally did not do it myself, it is possibly the case that some of my followers did it. I even made a specific post about it. There's absolutely no way. Because after doing the math, there's no way there are that many Buddhists in China. And non-Buddhists don't necessarily care about us monastics that much either, in most cases, I would say. But this answer isn't really a big deal or particularly significant to mention. So I think the numbers probably aren't that high. Even if there are that many, actually, some of them are just there out of curiosity. They're not necessarily interested in the teachings of Buddhism. Personally, I do sometimes go online using my phone when I have free time. After getting online, honestly, from the time I started until now, I can say that I generally have no interest whatsoever at all in looking at all the random worldly stuff online that distracts most people from meaningful pursuits. Sometimes I read a lot of books from both China and abroad online on various topics. I tend to enjoy reading things that are somewhat enlightening for people because it's simply more convenient to access them there. You know, that's really just how it is, honestly. When I came to Hong Kong, for a while, I thought that things here weren't very convenient in many ways. So I didn't go on Weibo and didn't post any updates. I said that day, I had come here once before, and I said this week I plan not to go online. The places I'm going might not even have a signal at all, really. Later, many people criticized me on Weibo saying, if you go to a ghost town where there's absolutely no cell phone reception at all, why bother? You shouldn't go to that place. Actually, I didn't say we had no signal. I meant places where there was no signal from mainland China. However, they interpreted this term as meaning there was no signal in Hong Kong. There is definitely a signal in Hong Kong, signals everywhere. So I occasionally make posts on Weibo, but sometimes I don't feel anything, and sometimes the writing isn't very good.
Hello there, Khenpo. I am a Master of Finance student at the University of Hong Kong. You just mentioned that people need faith. I completely agree with that point, but you also mentioned that the faith includes Buddhism, Christianity, and other religions. I actually have more Christian friends around me. Personally, I'd really like to hear your views on Christianity if you do not mind. Are there similarities between it and Buddhism? Are there contradictions? As a Buddhist, when engaging in conversations with Christian friends around me in terms of faith, what do you think is the best way to approach it from a Buddhist perspective here? Or should everyone just follow their own path and not discuss faith to avoid potential conflicts or misunderstandings? Thank you.
Especially, I think in Hong Kong, because it was under British rule for 100 years, Christianity is, of course, the majority. This is related to the environment and the philosophy of the government to some extent that shaped religious development there over many decades. Personally, I think Buddhism and Christianity should learn from and respect each other without conflict or competition through open and honest communication. Mutual unity and harmonious coexistence are the fundamental basic principles. In this regard, there are also many similarities between Buddhism and Christianity. For example, Buddhism places great emphasis on compassion and the idea of benefiting all beings through goodness. In these aspects, there are also many similarities. There are also some differences between the two religions. For example, Buddhism seeks to protect all forms of life with the greatest compassion possible toward every sentient being, whereas Christianity sometimes considers animals primarily as a source of nourishment for humans. This is something about Christianity that I don't quite fully understand, or rather, perhaps it's not really about understanding in the conventional sense. They simply have different doctrines, beliefs, and traditions. This might also be a major point of conflict or disagreement. But I think for now, the differences between Buddhism and Christianity can be set aside. It's just like the relationships between countries nowadays. Even if two countries have conflicts, they set those differences aside for the time being. They focus on areas of ongoing cooperation and continue to keep discussing business. Whenever national leaders meet, they talk about the important positive aspects of their relationship. So when it comes to certain issues, deeply rooted beliefs can't be changed overnight through simple debates alone. Therefore, it's best for everyone to work together in harmony toward common goals we share. We need to promote many of our positive values because positive values are very important. For example, in the present day, Christianity builds hospitals, runs important schools, and has many valuable ideas. Some Buddhists, however, are not always able to do these things. That's why I say in different settings, we Mahayana Buddhists should also thoughtfully consider learning from certain Christian practices. This does not mean that we need to learn absolutely everything they do. That is not what I am suggesting. However, there are some charitable concepts, and I encourage many Buddhists to learn from Christian practices in this regard. So, although some Christians may consider us to be heretics, the altruistic and compassionate spirit that is found within Buddhism is also something that is truly worth learning from. There are also many areas for meaningful exchange, such as the deeper meaning of emptiness and so on. Therefore, when the conditions are right in the future, we can have discussions together with people from various major denominations and religions. Actually, for people living in this world, especially for the various religions that exist in this world, each has its own charm, its own value, and its own reasons for existing. There is no need to exploit, exclude, or slander each other. This is absolutely and completely unnecessary. If even non-religious people can be so united and harmonious, then why can't religious people get along? We must strive to coexist harmoniously. Therefore, even in schools, for example, if there are more Christian students, they should not treat unfairly or discriminate in any way against Buddhist students, nor should they insist on a daily basis that Buddhist students must join their group. When the strength of Buddhist students is greater, they also shouldn't force non-Buddhists to join. No one should be compelled. Nor should other religious followers insist on recruiting people into their faith. This is called brainwashing education, and it is considered a very unethical practice in the West. So we should all really respect and mutually cooperate with each other. We should each promote and learn from one another based on our own traditions and values.
Hello, Rinpoche. I am a student at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Hong Kong. I am not a Buddhist, nor have I taken refuge with any Lama. I'm just interested in Buddhism in daily life. I read some books sometimes. I have a question. Buddhism teaches that blessings are sought by oneself and destiny is created by oneself. One's fate can be changed through one's own efforts. But what confuses me is that while fate can be changed, sometimes it's actually because we encounter the right conditions and opportunities to change our fate. And these conditions and opportunities are themselves predetermined. So, in that sense, if fate can be changed, isn't that also predestined? In other words, is a sentient being's present thought truly and really autonomous? Or are sentient beings actually just pieces in the grand game of cause and effect determined by past actions and conditions beyond their control? At every moment we are flowing along with conditions and causes? Thank you.
The answer to this question is actually quite simple. Fate can be changed, but it also cannot be changed. What can be changed? Certain elements of fate can indeed be influenced through our own choices and actions. Just like in the Buddhist text, Liao Fan's 4 Lessons. If you've read it, you should know. Through the course of his final 20 years of life, we can see that some things truly can be changed through wisdom and skillful action taken right now. Buddhism does not advocate absolute fatalism. Not everything is predestined. It's not the way some people imagine it to be. But it's also not the case that every aspect of fate can be changed. Some particularly severe karma created in past lives simply cannot be changed. It's just like the rules and laws in our world today. Are people in prison or incarcerated unable to change their fate forever? That's not the case. As long as there are convenient means, even those serving life sentences may have a chance to be released. But does that mean everything can change? No, it doesn't. When certain conditions and causes are absent, things still cannot change. In Buddhism, when causes and conditions are complete, change is possible. But there are indeed some things that cannot be changed. You must bear the consequences of your past actions yourself.
Hello, Khenpo. I am a middle school student who isn't very smart. Just now, I heard you mention compassion in your previous teachings earlier this evening here with us. Recently, I've also been reading your translation of the first chapter of The Way of the Bodhisattva and finding it quite helpful. It talks about Bodhicitta in there. So, does having a compassionate intention mean that one has Bodhicitta? Secondly, as an elementary school student who is still studying, as well as a middle school or even a university student, in our day-to-day lives, for example in Chinese class, we often study some classical texts, such as those of Sima Qian, or the renowned Preface to the Pavilion of Prince Teng, which are regarded as classics of traditional Chinese literature. All of these, in an invisible way, teach us to become attached to things like fame and profit, often influencing our choices. For example, Sima Qian said that after ancient people suffered setbacks, they would write books or do certain things in response. I want to do this or that for my own fame and gain, so I must do such and such to achieve my goals. Many students, by reading between the lines, are nowadays guided, almost without realizing it, to adopt this way of thinking through school lessons, thinking, oh, the ancients also pursued fame and profit like this. So should we do the same? As we grow up in the course of our lives, if, let's say, no matter whether the fame or profit that may be ahead is good or bad, I still have to chase after it. Even if I don't achieve it, I must still desperately pursue fame and fortune.
First, there is indeed a difference between bodhicitta and compassion, because compassion truly consists of genuine loving kindness and empathy at its very core and essence. Wishing all sentient beings to be free from suffering and to attain happiness. This is called compassion. Wishing that all sentient beings, of course, compassion can be divided into worldly compassion and Mahayana compassion. Worldly compassion means we feel sympathy for all humans and the friends around us. This is called a lesser form of compassion. Greater compassion is wishing all sentient beings to be free from suffering and attain happiness. This is the cause of bodhicitta. It is only by relying on such compassion that bodhicitta arises. This answers your first question. The second question is about education in today's world. Indeed, no matter where you are, there is a prevailing trend of chasing fame and profit. Many people from a young age are taught by their teachers about how to succeed when they grow up and so on. Just now, you also mentioned a lot of how to this, how to that, and I also told you about how to this, how to that. So teachers also tell you how to do things when you grow up, how to achieve success in life, and so on. For example, actually from a young age in school, there is always this idea of how to help sentient beings and so on as you grow older. How to help other living beings, how to give back to society and so on. If that's the case, it might be even better. So we hope that everyone from a young age in middle school and elementary school really experiences a shift in mindset from early on, which is very important. When you're very young, if your focus is only on having a house and your own survival, and you really don't look beyond that at all, then when you grow up, you'll just become that kind of person. But if from a young age, your goal is not just to live for yourself, that is to truly contribute or dedicate yourself in meaningful ways to humanity and to all living beings, then your sense of life's true value and importance will also grow in that direction from an early age. The direction in which we choose to grow is indeed quite significant and important. For example, when we consider the wisdom, insight, and eloquence of people like Sima Qian, there are certainly aspects of theirs that we, as later generations, can agree with and appreciate. However, in some ways, after all, they were people who lived in the secular world, which is understandable given the context of their times. So there is value in what we learn from them as well.
Thank you, Khenpo. Due to current time constraints, we are now able to ask 4 final questions.
Hello, Khenpo. So far, I don't yet have my own religious beliefs. So the questions I might be asking may be a bit naive. Please forgive me if I have offended you. During your speech just now, you said, "It is a blessing for a person to have their own religious beliefs." I think at this point I might not really have the affinity with any religion yet. Then I was wondering if someone doesn't have a religious belief, they must, through life and learning, gradually develop their own personal beliefs. Can they, through their own genuine kindness, study, and reflection, also achieve the kind of inner peace that religion can bring them and gain some wisdom? This is my first question. My second question is, I would sincerely like to ask, every religion has its own classic works. When people study them, they might read with a sense of devotion, deep respect, and belief. But is it possible, perhaps, that if you believe in something too much, it could affect your ability to think critically and independently? Thank you.
A platform like ours for communication is actually open to both those with faith and those without faith. It's an open, inclusive, and free way to communicate and explore with everyone from all backgrounds. This is absolutely necessary because that's what society has become. Everyone has different hobbies and interests. I especially respect those who do not have faith and choose to live differently from me, because they have their own reasons, their own lifestyles, and values worth honoring equally. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, as a Buddhist, from the perspective of someone who has studied Buddhism for a long time and based on my own personal understanding of these teachings and direct experience in practice, I especially hope that many people will have belief, though of course there are some individuals who do not. Relying on religious concepts or other kinds of ideologies, such as various beliefs, values, or traditions, to benefit humanity or in fact to improve oneself is also perfectly acceptable. But in fact, if you use certain ideas or knowledge from other religions, that is actually also a form of faith in a broader and more inclusive sense altogether, because what we call faith can generally be understood in both a broad and a narrow sense, or typically in both. It's not absolutely necessary for you to become a believer or a follower of a religion. As long as you have a sincere interest in it, that is also a form of trust in it and a kind of admiration for it. So, faith also has many different levels, from superficial acceptance to profound realization based on direct experience personally. Now, regarding your second question, let me elaborate a bit on that. I think this is impossible because the fundamental principles and teachings that are thoroughly elaborated upon in the scriptures, if they are in any way uncivilized, unscientific, lacking in wisdom, or are not true, and we believe in them too blindly, it could have some impact or even a stimulating effect on our work, our lives, and even our entire existence. There may be some influence or even provocation, but I believe that the precious scriptures I have encountered, everything they discuss, is truly the very essence and the absolute best of human thought. Anyone who comes into contact with them will surely be bathed and thoroughly cleansed in spirit and soul. They bring tremendous benefit to the purification of every person's mind. Because at the very beginning, due to our environment, our mindset, and various other reasons, we may misunderstand it or have an attitude of distancing or isolating ourselves from it. This is something some people are bound to do, but as we gradually come into contact with it, because in the end, perhaps many young people, when they are young and their minds are lively, for various reasons or because the right conditions haven't matured, keep a respectful distance from these classics and from religion. But when they reach the twilight of their lives, they may come to realize that what is discussed in religion, including our birth, aging, sickness, death, and daily life, it's only when impermanence becomes very real in our lives that we get the chance to draw closer to it. So I think it's only after studying for a period of time that I came to understand that these classics will not contaminate or adversely affect our minds. And because they are the truth, if it's the truth, then people from any society, any social class, all need it. If it isn't the truth, then I can't really say much about it.
Thank you, Khenpo. There's also a young child in the back who's been raising their hand, eager to ask a question. Could the Dharma friends please pass the microphone to him? Hello, Khenpo. I am a third-grade elementary student. I would like to take refuge. Please compassionately grant me refuge.
Even third graders are taking refuge. Very good. Then I will recite a refuge ritual. For those who wish to take refuge, I will grant it. No need to move. Stay seated. I'll recite briefly. That's enough. For those who don't want to take refuge, no need to be afraid or leave. As long as you don't take refuge in your heart, that's fine. It's impossible for us to force you to take refuge. Lama lar tiao samcho, sanje lar tiao samcho, cholar tiao samcho, gena lar tiao samcho, lama lar tiao samcho, sanje lar tiao samcho, cholar tiao samcho, gena lar tiao samcho, lama lar tiao samcho, sanje lar tiao samcho, cholar tiao samcho, gena namo Buddhaya, namo Dharmaya, namo Sanghaya, namo Buddhaya, namo Dharma, namo Sanghaya, namo Buddhaya, namo Dharmaya, namo Sanghaya, pyondanda teyon soba, rajamba anda buldoba sanjo, harjara shakya pala. Chudor tiao samcho, churnam tamjo gelejon, tirkite shen shopyason, gelango ba kama ba, gejon chimpender, duba chen amasharon, geva pasam toper, rungo samne, andana sanji tamba. Pichiwa kanda yang to lama damdar me chuji wa lama shen satan lam ji yang da ram zon do chen chen ko kompon yer to shu. Ha.
Thank you so much, Khenpo.
And also that person in yellow just now, she kept raising her hand over and over.
Khenpo, I have 2 questions and 1 wish. My first question is, realizing emptiness truly allows one to attain freedom beyond life itself, right? No longer fearing birth and death, or no longer being afraid of life and death. But I would like to ask, being able to accurately foresee birth and death, or to come and go freely between life and death, what is that related to? Is it due to actual practice? That's my first question. My second question is, when one's eyes are truly clear and one begins to practice, apart from being able to cut off or extinguish subtle habitual tendencies and making the ultimate bodhicitta even more steadfast,
Is there an even deeper meaning? Are there any issues that need to be watched out for or avoided in this regard? That's my second question. The third is one of my wishes. Through my study of the works of Venerable Longchenpa and Mipham Rinpoche, I have developed and now possess unwavering faith in the pure lineage of the Nyingma tradition. I am deeply longing to request from you the transmission of the pure Nyingma lineage. My aspiration is to have wings like the great Garuda bird, so that one day I may truly grow and mature. I do not know by what means I might receive your guidance. Thank you, Khenpo.
Regarding the first question, we definitely need long-term study and consistent practice in order to achieve success. If we have this kind of practice, states that transcend the natural, the mind and thought can arise, and this can happen naturally. This is possible for everyone. Therefore, first and foremost, we must have unwavering and steadfast faith in our practice and the Dharma. Only in this way can our own dedicated practice yield certain and reliable results in the future. The second question, during our study and practice, we may sometimes encounter some adverse conditions and obstacles. If we wish to overcome these adversities and difficulties and seek the most sublime states, of course, we must make diligent efforts and endure hardships along the way. At the same time, we should also frequently study the genuine Vajra words of great masters and accomplished teachers. There are so many different teachings in Chinese Han Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. Therefore, we should study, carefully examine and thoroughly read these important teachings. Now, the third question, we have previously discussed some of the profound and significant teachings of the highly respected Venerable Longchenpa and the renowned Mipham Rinpoche. There are also some lecture notes and some discs available through the internet and other available resources. You should gradually be able to obtain them as well. As long as you make a little inquiry or investigation in this regard, it shouldn't be very difficult.
There are two more questions which I will leave to the monastic teachers.
Khenpo, hello. I am a student. Nice to meet you.
Which university are you from?
I am a student at the Center of Buddhist Studies, University of Hong Kong. This July, some classmates and I went on a month-long pilgrimage to the Tibetan regions. We passed through Ganzi and Luhuo. Unfortunately, we had planned to visit Larung Buddhist Academy, but didn't get the chance. I never expected you would come here instead. My question is, in the Han regions, there are many misunderstandings about Tibetan Buddhism. During your talk, you also mentioned some things, that Tibetan Buddhism has many fascinating and dazzling rituals and so on. But in fact, Tibetan Buddhism has a very systematic approach to practice. Whether it's scriptural study or meditation, both are extremely important. So today you could say, you are also here as a representative of Larung Buddhist Academy to give this talk to everyone. Could I ask you, using the teaching system of Larung Buddhist Academy as an example, to briefly explain this systematic approach to everyone? Since we're almost out of time, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You've been standing the whole time. Would that be all right? Thank you.
To clarify, I am not here as a representative of Larung Buddhist Academy. I am here entirely in my personal capacity, and in fact with many people, including the Dharma masters and teachers at the University of Hong Kong in various departments and fields. Even though our time together has been short during this brief visit here, everyone has communicated with each other very happily, because many intellectuals have a concern for society and for Buddhism in meaningful ways, and there are many things we have in common. Although I wouldn't dare call myself an intellectual, I have been deeply concerned about Buddhist education for many years. So we share a lot of similar ideas, which helps people from different backgrounds communicate and understand each other more easily. Within Chinese Han Buddhism, as I briefly mentioned at the beginning, in mainland China, it is true that Larung Buddhist Academy is especially well known and regarded as highly influential. When His Holiness first went to Mount Wutai in 1987, at that time, Chinese Han Buddhism was not particularly flourishing in the mainland, and Tibetan Buddhism was barely flourishing. From that time, the tradition of listening, contemplating, practicing, studying, and researching was established. In the Han regions today, although not especially prosperous, within Buddhist communities, at least to some extent, people have generally developed a slightly more positive understanding of Tibetan Buddhism. For most people, there is a positive understanding. And in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and some other individual regions specifically. Now, I also notice, especially as you just mentioned, that some things which are not at all part of Tibetan Buddhism are actually quite dazzling and confusing. And on the surface, it seems as if Tibetan Buddhism is really a particularly strange religion. Some people even label Tibetan Buddhism as a cult. If we put it that way, of course, on the one hand, as Buddhists, we also go with the flow and observe the karmic fortune of sentient beings. Back when Chan Buddhism was being transmitted in the Han regions, there were also many people who did not fully understand it at that time. When Mahayana Buddhism first flourished in India, there were also a significant number of people who didn't understand it at the time. If we look at history, Tibetan Buddhism was basically unknown in the Han regions in the past. So there are also, in fact, historical reasons for this. But on the other hand, in contemporary times, there are also many intellectuals. And some people say this is a so-called Tibetan Buddhism craze. Now it has actually become a noticeable trend. Why is it that in the 20th and 21st centuries, so many Westerners are so eager for, fascinated by, and admiring of Tibetan Buddhism? Many great masters say it's because they need to find a way to resolve their suffering in life. Just as people who are thirsty need to drink water, nowadays many troubled individuals in cities after practicing Tibetan Buddhism really are able to reduce their afflictions and stress. This is a positive effect. But I also want to say, according to some traditions of the Five Sciences Buddhist Academy, or if we speak in terms of their actual teaching methods, it might take us a very long time. Although I have stayed at the Buddhist Academy, I have been there since about 1985 up to now, so it's been quite a long time. I may have attended various classes. For example, in the study of the exoteric school, Buddhist logic, Madhyamaka, Prajna, Vinaya, and Abhidharma, as well as studying some aspects of Chinese Han Buddhism. At our Buddhist Academy, overall speaking, to put it simply, we absolutely do not reject or exclude any form or school of Buddhism at all. All schools of Chinese Han Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism can be studied, but we must do so in accordance with the Dharma. Some time ago, I saw Zhu Qingxi, the former president of the University of Science and Technology of China, who went to Tibetan area within a span of 7 days and learned about many Tibetan lamas and some great masters there. Then he became involved in additional dialogue on these issues. From what I saw, he did gain some positive understanding. But in fact, his understanding was only over 7 days, not a long-term one. I sincerely hope that many intellectuals can gain a more positive and comprehensive understanding. It's not as some people say, nor as some people do nowadays. On this beautiful land of Tibetan area, there truly exists a particularly complete form of Buddhism today. It can also be said that a very complete and notably well-preserved form of Buddhism has been preserved. Therefore, we would also like to further actively promote this kind of Buddhist thought. On the one hand, let it indeed be preserved. On the other hand, it truly benefits many people in profound and lasting ways over time. This could be beneficial to everyone who encounters these teachings sincerely if they approach it with an open heart and mind.
Hello, good morning, Khenpo. How are you? I am also a student at the Center for Buddhist Studies at the University of Hong Kong. Today, I would like to ask Khenpo a question regarding academic matters. In the Kalachakra Tantra, the concept of other-emptiness is the most important theoretical principle academically. Well, not just academically. Other-emptiness is an important Buddhist philosophical theory. But most of what we currently encounter is self-emptiness or no-self in Buddhist teachings and philosophical discussions nowadays. So I would like to ask Khenpo to give a brief summary on this aspect. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, there are also many dedicated Dharma teachers and professors at universities. Not only Buddhists, but also monastics. To me, this is also quite a new experience in this modern university setting today. The other day at Fudan University, I saw a monk from Sri Lanka. At the time, I also found it quite novel. and interesting to witness. There are even more here, which is very good. What you just asked was about the concept of other-emptiness. Actually, other-emptiness can also be discussed within the exoteric schools. It can also be discussed in the esoteric Kalachakra Tantra. Generally speaking, in Tibetan Buddhism, what is called self-emptiness is associated with the Gelug school, while other-emptiness is associated with the Jonang school. This is how people often refer to them. But in fact, many great masters of the Nyingma school have analyzed the views of self-emptiness and other-emptiness. For example, the second turning of the Dharma wheel by Shakyamuni Buddha, as well as the 6 treatises on the middle way composed by Bodhisattva Nagarjuna, and the Madhyamaka teachings of Chandrakirti and the Madhyamaka of Shantideva. All of these discuss the principle of the emptiness of all phenomena, mainly elucidating the teachings of the second turning of the Dharma wheel. The third turning discusses Buddha nature. Teachings on Buddha nature are explained in Maitreya's The Uttara Tantra Shastra, Nagarjuna's praise of the Dharma Dhatu, and texts like the Treatise on the Praise of the Dharmakaya. These works serve to explain the definitive sutras of the Buddha's third turning of the Dharma wheel. Actually, in the second turning of the Dharma wheel, it is said that all phenomena are empty in nature. In the third turning of the Dharma wheel, it is said that things are not empty. In fact, this does not mean that these two are completely contradictory. It's just that the emphasis advocated by each is different. One focuses on luminosity, while the other emphasizes emptiness. In reality, these two viewpoints are united as the inseparability of appearance and emptiness in texts like the Kalachakra Tantra or the Guhyagarbha Tantra. Other-emptiness is empty of other but not itself, and self-emptiness is empty of itself. When we make distinctions, these are just two conceptual discriminations. In fact, whether it's the Jonang school's view or the other-emptiness acknowledged in the Kalachakra Tantra, it's like in the Lankavatara Sutra, where the Buddha specifically taught Mahamati. The true nature of Tathagatagarbha is not the same as the Atman of non-Buddhist traditions. Why is that? The true nature of Tathagatagarbha is free from permanence, free from self, and free from all conceptual elaborations. This is what is called the genuine Tathagatagarbha, also known as the true other-emptiness. In reality, both emptiness and non-emptiness are merely conceptual fabrications established by our discriminating mind. But the true nature of Tathagatagarbha transcends such states. People refer to it by name as other-emptiness. It's just that during the second turning of the Dharma wheel, it was not explicitly taught. On this point, the Indian scholars Kandrakurti and Bhaviveka debated for a long time. Eventually, after much discussion, their views were successfully integrated into one. Therefore, as Buddhists, if we later combine the second and third turnings of the Dharma wheel, that is to say, the union of appearance and emptiness, this union of appearance and emptiness is not something imagined by our consciousness. It is the true great emptiness that is free from our conceptual mind. This so-called great emptiness actually transcends both other-emptiness and self-emptiness. This is the Buddha's true ultimate intention, and such a state is related to this. Mipham Rinpoche specifically wrote a treatise called The Lion's Roar of Other-Emptiness. In The Lion's Roar of Other-Emptiness, these two views are carefully integrated and thoroughly explained in detail. Otherwise, it is truly a highly specialized subject and should be considered a field of deep advanced research. With our usual brief and concise words, we simply cannot express its true meaning.
Thank you, Khenpo, for your wonderful answer. Due to time constraints, our event today will come to an end here. Finally, let us invite Venerable Shi Yankong, Acting Director of the Center of Buddhist Studies at the University of Hong Kong, to come on stage to take a commemorative photo together with Khenpo Sodargye and exchange souvenirs.
This is the 8 auspicious symbols. Auspiciousness,
Thank you, Venerable and Khenpo. Please rise to respectfully see off Khenpo Sodargye and Venerable Shi Yankong as they leave the venue.